Hello, how's it going, everyone? It's a little bit overcast, a little chilly. We might get some rain, maybe some snow. The weather's kind of all over the place, but I am here with Ella Enchanted for you guys. Yeah, I'm here with Ella Enchanted. I'm so excited. You guys, we are almost done with the book. And I'm really glad that you've wanted to continue this adventure with me. So here we go. Remember, Ella is going to the fancy balls to honor Prince Char, and she is wearing a mask, so it's a masked ball, even though a lot of the girls have already taken their masks off so that they could show off their gorgeousness to the prince and everything like that. So Ella is in disguise, and she got some help from Lucinda and from Mandy. And remember, there are 3 nights, so she's been to the first night, and she talked with Char, but then she had to leave because we've got that Cinderella thing going on where she had to leave by midnight. So now we're on to the second night. Are you ready? I vowed not to approach Char during the second ball. It was too dangerous. The evening was clear, but Lucinda provided the coach anyway. My tiara and pendant were pink roses, my gown a silvery blue with a pale purple petticoat. Tonight, there was no receiving line. I searched for a seat where I'd have a clear view of the dance and where others would have a poor view of me. I found one in a recess partially blocked by a giant fern in a stone pot. I scrutinized Char's dancing partners. Although I knew I had no right to resent a rival, he danced 3 times with the yellow-haired wench who'd made him laugh the night before. She wore no mask and was lovely. I couldn't leave him to her. The clock struck the half hour. Soon it would be 11. I checked my mask, then left my hiding place and stood with the others who observed the dance. Char saw me. Over the shoulder of his partner, he mouthed, "Wait for me." I grew roots. An earthquake could not have moved me. The clock struck 11:15. It struck 11. If it had struck the end of the world, I'd have stayed as I was. Why? Because it was a command, right? The final figure ended, and he came for me. "Will you dance?" he asked. I looked for you. Did I have time? I accepted his arm, and we stepped into the dance, a slow saraband. "I was here all the while," I said. "I watched you." "What did you see?" he asked. An excellent host who had little real enjoyment in the ball, except when he danced with the blonde beauty. "Was it so apparent?" he asked. "It was to me," I said. He changed the subject. "Will you be here tomorrow? My father has asked me to perform an Aorthian song." "When will you sing?" "Before midnight, please," I thought. "Sometime late," he grinned. "If I'm lucky, many of the guests will have already gone. They needn't hear their future ruler disgrace himself." "There will be no disgrace, not if you were taught in Aortha. What will you sing?" "A homecoming song," and he sang some of it in my ear. The dance ended, and he stopped. "There's more. I want you to hear it. Will you?" I resolved to stay late the next night. I'd managed to reach home without Lucinda's gifts, even if I had to swim. "I'll be delighted to, but I must leave now tonight. I'm expected by 12. How close to midnight was it now? He would think it odd if my jewelry vanished. "Oh, I'd hoped— I'm sorry, He bowed. I curtsied. "Till tomorrow, Majesty." "One last thing." He caught my hand. "Please call me Char." Chapter 28. I rode home calling myself a dolt, but rejoicing nonetheless. In my room, I opened my magic book to see if it would show me anything about the ball or Char's thoughts. There was nothing. The next morning, I tried again and found an entry in his journal from the night before. "How dare she?" he wrote. "That fright, Hattie, rushed at me the instant Layla left. 'Some wenches will stoop to anything to intrigue a man,' she said. 'I should be devastated if I had to wear a mask in order to be interesting.' She warned me the mask might conceal anything, a deformity, advancing age, the face of a known bandit. 'If I were king or ruler,' she said, 'I would order her to remove her mask.' I wanted to reply, 'If you were queen, every Kyrian would wish you'd put a mask on.' Certainly, I've wondered why Layla hides her face, but it may be the custom in Bast. If she is a bandit, she's courageous to come to court. More likely if she is disfigured. Maybe she has a scar, or one eyelid droops, or her nose is a mottled purple color. I don't care. I'm pleased to have found a friend at these balls, where I expected to find only tedium and boredom. Does Layla, want more than friendship? Why did I write that name? Did she come to these balls as every other maiden did, hoping to wed a prince, no matter what I'm like, so long as I'm a prince? I confess, I do wish to see her face. I turned the page and found a reckoning from Olive to Hattie. You owe me 6 KJs. I danced with him 2 times when you were eating. Pay me. In the afternoon, I slipped out of the manor to the greenhouse near the menagerie. There I picked daisies and wove the flowers into a garland to replace Lucinda's tiara. If I was to stay at the ball after midnight, I couldn't wear Lucinda's jewels. My gown for the last ball was my favorite, white with a low neckline edged in lace. The skirt parted in front to reveal a petticoat with 3 lace flounces. In back, my skirt was tied with a large bow that flowed into the graceful sweep of my train. I faced myself in the mirror and began to set the garland in my hair, but Mandy stopped me. Here's something better, love. She handed me 2 packages wrapped in tissue paper. Open them. They were a tiara of woven silver leaves and a silver chain on which hung an aster made of lapis. Oh, Mandy! I bought them at the market. They won't disappear at midnight. She placed the tiara on my hair and fastened the chain around my neck. You make them beautiful, sweet. I looked in the mirror. Mandy's selections added something that Lucinda's creations hadn't. Just right for my gown and just right for me. Char was waiting for me at the palace entrance. When the carriage drove up, he dashed to help me out before the coachman could step down. The clock struck 8:30, the beginning of the last ball. You look splendid, he said, bowing. I was touched by his gallantry, since he believed me to be disfigured. As we went inside, he said, Your carriage is an unusual color. Not in Bast, I said. If he knew much about Bast, I was in for some trouble, unless orange coaches were common there. He took my arm. May I visit you there? Bast would be honored, I said. And you? He asked. I'd be honored too, I answered. If I'm going to visit your family, you should meet mine, he said. I'd be delighted someday, I said. Now is a good time. They're nearby. You're nearby. Now? I said. King Gerald? He chuckled. That's who my father is. But he's kind to everyone except ogres. You don't need to worry, he said. The king rose when we entered. I curtsied, blushing for my rudeness in wearing a mask before him. When I rose, he was beaming at Char. Queen Daria was smiling too. I'd seen them many times, but never so close. The queen had a pretty face, perfect for broad smiles, an honest face. Char resembled his father, but softened a bit. The king's face was severe, although merry now. Mother, father, may I introduce Lady Layla, my new friend and acquaintance from Bast, where the carriages are orange. Lady Layla, King Gerald took my hand. He had the roundest, deepest voice I'd ever heard. Welcome to Frel. Most welcome, Queen Daria embraced me. I've waited long to meet the maiden my son loves. I don't love her, mother, said Char. That is, I like her, certainly. Over the queen's shoulder, I saw Char looking silly with embarrassment. Queen Daria held me away from her and searched my face. I can't tell through the mask, but you remind me of a lady I admired. She had the most playful spirit I ever knew. She added, so only I could hear, if you are like her, then Char has chosen well. She released me, and I stepped away dazed. I was certain she had meant mother. Lady Layla is proof I haven't been polite and distant to everyone, Char said. Excellent proof, King Gerald answered. Bring along more proof, and we'll be convinced. He frowned at my mask. We should return to my guests, Char said hastily. As we left, I heard Queen Daria say, I don't remember any orange coaches in Bast. Back in the hall, Char asked me to save a dance for him later. Just now, I'd better be polite and distant some more. I didn't want him to go. Every instant of our final evening was too precious to lose even one. But I nodded, and he left me. I watched the dance and turned down partners. Mistress! Hattie stood before me, simpering. I've wanted to catch you alone, my dear. I am Lady Hattie, daughter of Dame Olga. Layla had no reason to hate Hattie. I'm happy to meet another Frelin, I said. Charmant says you live in Bast. No one called him Charmant. She proceeded to pump me about my family and circumstances, pressing me until I said, I hadn't thought it was the custom here to interrogate visitors. Oh, I apologize, but one has to be so careful when one is connected to royalty. You see, Charmant and I have an understanding. We are secretly engaged, she said. Had she gone mad to speak such a falsehood? To protect him, I must ask that you remove your mask. I must see what lies beneath. Thank heavens she had asked and not ordered. You may ask, I said, but I shall not oblige. Good evening, Lady Hattie. I turned and began to walk away. Layla, there you are. Char was back. Now dance with me, he said. Your prince commands you to. I want to spend the rest of the ball with you. He bowed to Hattie, standing a few feet away. Excuse us, he said. I curtsied, reveling in her fury. They are all asking about you, he said, pulling me close to the dance pulling me close as the dance required. Who is this mysterious stranger, they say? The maiden who wears a mask, I said. Why, he stopped himself and changed subject, speaking of court. I wondered how many more dances we'd have. The clock chimed 9:30. In a few hours, Layla would be gone forever. I'd never be so close to Char again. Despite a fierce struggle, I began to cry. He might not have seen because of the mask, but a tear coursed down my cheek. Layla, I'm so sorry. There was so much remorse in his voice that I was startled. Why? What were you saying? I'm the one to apologize. I wasn't listening. I was thinking how sad I'll be to leave Frel. I laughed a little. No more balls every night. But you can come back, can't you? He asked. I suppose, but it won't be the same. You can never go back to a moment when you were happy, I said. That's true. The dance ended. Would you like to go outside? Every time the musicians start up, I'm reminded of all the maidens with whom I should be dancing. Outdoors, we strolled through the castle gardens while I kept listening for chimes. How much time had passed? How much was left? Char spoke of Frel, asking whether I'd visited this site or that, and describing each one for me. I must have answered him reasonably when I had to, but if called upon to repeat what I said or what he said, I couldn't. Most of my mind and all of my heart were set on the sound of his voice, the warmth of his arm in mine, the rhythm of our steps together, the fresh scent of the night air, and on the wish that each minute would last a year. I cried again, but in the dark he didn't see, and the clock moved relentlessly on. 10, half after, 11, half after. That's enough, he said finally. I can face them now. Inside, we danced again. Soon it will be time for me to sing. After that, I'll either be surrounded by worshipping music lovers or shunned by all. Surrounded, I said, and I would never shun you. I wonder. You may shun me if you know the truth. He took a breath and was suddenly quite formal. I apologize if I unintentionally raised your expectations, but I've resolved never to marry. So, the parties hadn't been his idea. I stifled a triumphant laugh. You didn't mislead me, I said. I've only been saving stories for home. I'll tell them, the prince said this to me, and I said this back to him, and mother, I made him laugh. I made our prince laugh, and father, he danced with me, one night, with almost no one except me. What did he wear, my sister will want to know. Did he have a sword with him always, father will ask. Char tightened his hold on my waist. Marriage is supposed to be forever, but friendship can be forever too. Will you? I felt something on the back of my head. Hattie, dancing nearby with the Earl of Denby, snatched off my mask. I let go of Char and covered my face with my hands, but not quickly enough. Should I keep going? Okay, I'm going to keep going because this is so good. Even though I should leave you hanging, because cliffhangers are good too. But no, I'm going to keep going. Chapter 29. Ella? Hattie shrieked. Char gasped. Ella? I broke away from him and began to run as the clock struck midnight. Char would have caught me in a moment, but Hattie must have held him somehow. Outside, a huge pumpkin stood uselessly in the line of carriages. I continued to flee. A white rat skittered across my path. Somewhere, I lost one of my slippers. I ran on, listening for pursuers. At home, maybe Mandy would know what to do, or I'd hide in the cellar, in the stable somewhere. How could I have gone to the balls, to put Char and Kyria in such danger? Mandy, I shouted as soon as I reached the manor. A servant stared at me. I ran into the kitchen. I've endangered Char again, and Kyria, what can I do? Pack your things, Mandy said as soon as she understood my rushed explanation. Where shall I go? I'll come with you. We'll find work as cooks. Hurry. Can't you pack for us by magic? She'd done it before. It was just small magic. Nothing is small magic in a moment like this, she said. Go. Fairies. I raced to my room and began to throw things into my carpet bag. I had very little. It would be the work of a minute. I heard the door open downstairs. There were voices. We'd never managed to leave. I tore off my ball gown and donned my tattered servant's wear, rubbing the sooty skirt across my face. Over my hair, I tied a ragged length of linen. Nancy appeared at my door. It's the prince. He wants to see everyone. I didn't move. She giggled nervously. He won't eat us, at least I hope not. Come. I followed her, my heart drumming loud enough to drown out all thought. He stood in the hall with his knights and our entire household. In the midst of all that was more important. I hated him to see me covered in rags and cinders. I stationed myself behind the tallest manservant, but Char and his knights walked among us. Straining for a new disguise of servant and simpleton, I sucked on my fist and stared out vacantly. Sir Stephen found me. Here's a maid, he said. Come, lass. He took my hand and pulled me to Char. Ella? Ella? Why are you dressed so? Your Majesty, I was about to deny my name, but Hattie spoke for me. That's only Cinders the scullery maid, she said. Sire, would you care for a refreshment now that you're here? She's a scullery maid? He asked. A scullery maid, of no account, but our cook Mandy has cakes fit for a prince. The door wasn't far. Sir Stephen still held my hand. I pulled, but I couldn't break away. Lass, Char said to me, I won't hurt you no matter what. He cupped a hand under my chin and tilted my face up to his. I wanted to catch his hand and hold it. As soon as we touched, I knew he recognized me. He brought my slipper out from his cloak. It belonged to Ella, and it will fit her alone whether she is a scullery maid or a duchess. A chair was brought. I wished for normal-sized feet. That's my slipper, Hattie said. It's been missing for years. Your feet are too big, Olive blurted. Try it, Char told Hattie. I lost it because it kept falling off. She sat and removed her own slipper. I caught the familiar smell of her feet. She couldn't even wedge her toes in. I'm younger than Hattie, Olive said, so my feet are smaller, probably. They were bigger. Now it was my turn. Char knelt, holding the slipper. I extended my foot, and he guided it. The slipper fit perfectly, of course. What was I going to do? His face was close to mine. He must have seen my terror. You don't need to be Ella if you don't want to be, he said softly. He was so good. I'm not, I said, but in spite of myself, tears streamed down my cheeks. I saw hope spread across his face. That letter was rubbish. A trick. He glared at Hattie, then turned to me, his look probing. Do you love me? He still spoke softly. Tell me. An order. I do. I was sobbing and smiling at once. How was I going to give him up again? Char was jubilant. His voice rang out. Then marry me! Another order. I nodded and continued to cry, but my hand found its way into his. Don't marry him, Ella, Hattie commanded, giving my name away for once and all. I withdrew my hand. I can't, I said. Perhaps Hattie would save us. Hattie, don't be a fool, Mum Olga snapped. Don't you want to be stepsister to the Queen and make her give you whatever you like? She smiled at me. His Highness is kind enough to want to marry you, Ella, my sweet. It had begun. The curse would make Hattie and Mum Olga as grand as they wanted to be, and it would provide endless wealth for Olive. Char was looking at me with such gladness, and I loved him so. I was the cause of his joy and would be the cause of his destruction. A secret delivered to his enemies, a letter written in my own hand, a covert signal given by me, poison in his drink, a dagger in his ribs, a fall from a parapet. That's a tower. Marry me, Ella, he said, the order a whisper now. Say you'll marry me. Anyone else could have said no or yes. This wasn't a royal command. Char probably had no idea he'd given an order. But I had to obey. I wanted to obey. Hated to harm him, wanted to marry him. I could destroy my love and my land. They were in danger and no one could rescue them. We were all doomed, all cursed. Char was too precious to hurt, too precious to lose, too precious to betray, too precious to marry, too precious to kill, too precious to obey. Words rose in me, filled my mouth, pushed against my lips. Yes, I'll marry you. Yes, I love you. Yes, yes, yes. I swallowed, forcing them down, but they tore at my throat. A strangled noise erupted from me, but not words, not consent. He put a hand on my shoulder. I must have frightened him, but I couldn't see his face. My vision had turned inward where the battle raged. I heard Lucinda's voice. My gift to Ella is obedience. She will always be obedient. I saw Mandy telling me to eat my birthday cake. I saw Seif leering at me and heard him. No need to be persuasive with this one. It'd cook itself if we told it to. I saw Olive counting my coins, Mum Olga standing over me while I scrubbed the courtyard, Hattie wearing Mother's necklace. I'd eaten the cake, drunk the tonic, given up the necklace, slaved for my stepmother, let Olive suck me dry. They'd gotten all they wanted of me, but they weren't going to get Char. Never, never. Be obedient. Marry him. Say yes, say yes, say yes. The tears streaming from my eyes were acid burning my cheeks. My mouth filled with liquid, bile and blood from biting my tongue, salty and corrosive and sweet. In spite of myself, my mouth opened. Consent had won. Obedience had won. But I clamped my hand over my mouth. My yes was stillborn. I remembered Char at Mother's funeral, waiting for me while I cried, grieving for Mother too. I heard his promise at the menagerie, soon I shall catch a centaur and give it to you. I saw him binding Seif's ankles. I saw him, vest flapping, bow to Father after we'd flown down the stair rails. I saw the ball and King Gerald beaming at his son the hope and future of Kyria. Say yes and be happy. Say yes and live. Obey. Marry him. I began to rock in my chair. Forward the words were about to come. Back I reeled them in, faster and faster. The legs of the chair thudded on the tiles and pounded in my ears. Marry him. I won't. Marry him. I won't. Then I lost sense of all of it. I went on rocking and crying, but my thoughts burrowed within, concentrated on a point deep in my chest where there was room for only one truth. I must save Char. For a moment, I rested inside myself, safe, secure, certain, gaining strength. In that moment, I found a power beyond any I'd had before, a will and a determination I would never have needed if not for Lucinda, a fortitude I hadn't been able to find for a lesser cause, and I found my voice. No! I shouted. I won't marry you. I won't do it. No one can force me. I swallowed and wiped my mouth on my filthy sleeve. I leaped up, ready to defy anyone. Who would force you? Char sounded shocked. No matter who. I won't. I won't. They can't make me. No one can make me. I won't marry you. Olive said, She'll marry you. You told her to. She has to listen. She laughed. Marry him and give me your money. I won't! Stop ordering me to! I was still shouting, invigorated. I wanted to march waving banners. Char would not die because of me. Char would live, and prosper. She doesn't have to marry me, he said. Hush, Olive, Hattie said. Ella, go to your room. His Majesty can have no further need of you. Char said, I have great need of her. Hush, Hattie, I said, intoxicated with my success. I don't want to go to my room. Everyone must know I shan't marry the prince. I ran to the door to our street, opened it, and called out into the night, I shan't marry the prince. I turned back into the hall and ran to Char and threw my arms around his neck. I won't marry you. I kissed his cheek. He was safe from me. He turned my head and kissed me on the mouth. The kiss swept through me, and I clung to him, trembling. From behind me, Hattie shrilled, Go to your room this instant! I command you! I ignored her, but Char pulled away. Why won't you marry me? Why not, if you love me? He asked. I'm cursed! You wouldn't be safe if I were your wife. What was I saying? I hadn't told anyone about the curse since I was 8. Mother had forbidden it. Had someone told me to? No one had. Then why? My thoughts wouldn't settle. I wasn't going to marry Char, that was certain. He looked so handsome, smiling from our kiss, then frowning in confusion, a smudge of my soot on his nose. I wiped it off. Saving him made him more mine than ever. Could my refusal mean the spell was broken? Could it? I took stock of myself. I did feel different. Larger, fuller, more complete, no longer divided against myself, compulsion to comply against wish to refuse. Larger but lighter, much lighter, a burden shed, a massive burden. I defied Olive's command as well as Char's, and Hattie had sent me to my room, and I was still there. I had told my secret, but I felt no dizziness, no pain. You're free, Mandy said. The curse is over. She hugged me. You rescued yourself when you rescued the prince. I am proud and glad. I could shout. I had been able to break the curse myself. I'd had to have reason enough, love enough to do it, to find the will and the strength. My safety from the ogres hadn't been enough. Zulf's rescue hadn't been enough, especially not with guards about. My slavery to Mum Olga hadn't been enough. Kyria was enough. Char was enough. Now it was over, ended forever. I was made anew. Ella, just Ella. Not Ella the slave, not a scullery maid, not Layla, not Eleanor. Ella. Me. I tore off the rag that covered my hair. Then I curtsied to Char. When you asked for my hand a few minutes ago, I was still too young to marry. I looked up at him and saw a smile start. I'm older now, so much older that not only can I marry, but I can beg you to marry me. I knelt and took his hand. He didn't let me kneel before him. He pulled me up and kissed me again. I took that to signify his consent. Oh my gosh. So now we're in the epilogue. That's just wrapping up the story and what comes after. It's very short. And then we're going to finish the book, you guys. So exciting. In a month, we married. For the ceremony, I wore my first new gown in a year and mother's necklace, which I had reclaimed from Hattie. After my deception had been explained to them, King Gerald and Queen Daria welcomed me joyously into the royal family. My stepfamily was not invited to the wedding and had to celebrate, if they wished, in the streets with the rest of Frel. Father was invited, but he was traveling and didn't receive the invitation until it was too late. Arita did attend. We renewed our friendship and swore to visit each other often, an oath we've kept faithfully. All the exotic peoples, except ogres, were represented at the ceremony. Slannon gave us a new pottery piece by Agilon, an elf child embracing a tree. Zapf and Zulf were there, Zulf still a toddler since gnomes grow more slowly than humans. Euaxi came too and was responsible for keeping our animal guest, Apple, from galloping the length of the palace hall. Although we didn't invite Lucinda, she arrived anyway, with a gift. No need, Char and I chimed together. Remember when you were a squirrel, Mandy said. But the gift was what Father would have called a fairy trifle. It was a box, no larger than my thumbnail, which grew or shrank to accommodate whatever it was called upon to hold. Wonderfully useful and not harmful at all. We thanked Lucinda enthusiastically until she glowed with pleasure. In time, Hattie became reconciled to our marriage and used her connection to us to her best advantage. She never married, but Olive did. A garrulous widower fell in love with her unwavering attention. When she'd demand that he talk to her, he'd tell her about his triumphs, his enemies, his opinions on everything. She wasn't anxious to wed. In exchange for her consent, he paid her 20 KJs every day and served a white cake with every meal. Father and Mum Olga continued to love at a distance. After my marriage, he became successful again, trading on the respect commanded by the royal family. Char watched over him and intervened when necessary to save him or his victims from the consequences of his chicanery. Trickiness. Mandy lived with us as cook and godmother of our children and secret performer of small magic to protect us from colds, broken crockery, and the sundry inconveniences of the royal household. Nancy lived at the palace too and commanded a legion of servants, several of whom were in charge of polishing stair rails for their sliding monarchs. I refused to become a princess, but adopted the titles of court linguist and cook's helper. I also refused to stay at home when Char traveled and learned every language and dialect that came our way. When we left the children behind, my magic book kept us informed of their doings. Decisions were a delight after the curse. I loved having the power to say yes or no, and refusing anything was a special pleasure. My contrariness kept Char laughing, and his goodness kept me in love. And so, with laughter and love, we lived happily ever after. So good! Oops, sorry. Sticky note. We're done! We finished the book. I hope you guys enjoyed it. And I will have another book for you, and we will continue these read alouds, okay? Have a great day, guys. I'll talk to you later. Bye!